Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat. Resolves.
Right.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, DJ here. You're watching the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and I have a brand new Crimson Vow commander for you. It's an awesome human. It's Torens, Fist of the Angels. 1 green-white for a 2/2 legendary human cleric with training. Whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 green and white human soldier creature token with training. So Torens, when it attacks with other things, gets bigger, but it will also create 1/1s that get bigger themselves. Torens has the ability to go wide, and this means that you want a ton of creatures to be able to trigger this ability to get more creatures. This commander actually has me thinking of one of my own personal decks and a favorite of mine, God Eternal Oketra. 3 white for a 3/6 double strike, huge stats, hard to get rid of, and whenever you cast a creature spell, you create a 4/4 zombie. Now, this is way more commandery, it's got a bigger effect, but it was so hard to get rolling. I had to get up to 5 mana in mono white and then play a creature spell to start getting my real value. And so it felt slow. I would much rather have Torens giving you access to green and also a more relevant curve. Being able to get up to 3 seems really easy, and then deploy your creatures afterwards to flood the board and go wide. I also know the power of green because I have a Shalai Voice of Plenty deck that works with these disruptive creatures. And so I'm super excited to show you Torens and how good it can be. One thing I want to note is that I'm going to show you sort of a creature-based Torens deck that doesn't really go into the tribal synergies. I think if you look on EDH Rec, you're going to see a lot of people that love the humans in Crimson Vow and want more of those new card human synergies, which means that some of your available resources online might not lead you to the deck that you want. If you do want the human version of this deck, that's awesome. Look up Human Tribal on EDH Rec, look up the Torens deck list there. Just search humans on Scryfall and you can get what you're looking for. I'm going to show you my version of Torens. I think you're going to like it. All right, the first thing we want to do is play creatures, create tokens, and attack. That means our commander synergizes particularly well with this. And there's a lot of other creatures out there in Selesnya that create tokens and attack really well. Briss the Redeemed doubles up your tokens. Amara creates a token when it attacks. Same thing with Adeline, and it gets huge itself. But I don't think you need to go all in on aggression. I feel like Selesnya gets its strength from its ability to gain card advantage and disrupt at the same time. I like some of the card advantage and disruption that comes from Ranger Captain of Eos. Shutting down an opponent when they're about to go off can give you 1 extra turn that can have you win the game, and the card advantage of getting 1-drops is important. 1-drops are great, and a lot of time they're going to trigger another 1/1 or another 4/4 or draw you a card. There's tons of creature synergies in this deck. Esper Sentinel has you drawing cards. Sarah Ascendant just smashes people. Giver of Runes and Mother of Runes give you protection. That can be really great when you want to create lines of attack or just keep your board intact. I also like 1 or 0 drops that you can play at multiple stages in the game. Macias, Walking Ballista, Hangerback Walker, all of these synergize with +1/+1 counters, which we have, and they can be mana dumps in the late game, which is really important for an aggressive deck. Hopeful Initiate might be a clunky 1-drop, but it hits everything I want in this deck. A 1-drop, which means it's easy to cast and easy to trigger your creature casting. It attacks really well with training, so it gets bigger, synergizes with +1/+1 counters, and disrupts your opponent's artifacts or enchantments. It's like everything we want out of this deck. We can supplement that disruption with Cathar Commando. Manglehorn's great at taking out an artifact, but of course, if you want mass artifact enchantment removal, you have so many creatures in this deck that Aura Shards is just going to destroy everyone's mana rocks. It's going to be great. But one reason why I like Manglehorn too is because it keeps working after I cast it. Like, your opponent's artifacts entering the battlefield tapped is huge. That's also why I like Thalia. Being able to disrupt your opponent after it comes down and slow them down and mess with their game plan, that tempo advantage is going to be really good for an attacking deck. Now, one thing that's great is that this whole creature suite is customizable. You can play Aven Mind Sensors or Containment Priests or anything that works in your play group, and you can tailor it to what you want to disrupt. I'm a huge fan of that. One thing that's important to note about creature-based strategies is that they're inherently vulnerable. You need to use the creatures. You have to attack with them or get some sort of trigger based on them. I know that we're getting 1/1s when we cast creatures. That's great, but we want to build an ecosystem where casting a creature does a lot more than just create a 1/1. Glimpse of Nature and Rite of Harmony are going to be great. I love Rite of Harmony. That is just a creature entering the battlefield. So if you happen to cast a creature while your commander's on the battlefield, you're going to draw 2 cards, one for the token created and one for the creature. I'm in love with that. Beast Whisperer draws you a card when you cast creatures. It's a creature itself. Same thing with Guardian Project and the Great Henge. All of these won't trigger off of your tokens, but the Great Henge gives you +1/+1 counters, which is a sub-theme in this deck. Mentor of the Meek and Welcoming Vampire will draw you cards when little things come into play, and there's plenty of them in this deck, not to mention they will trigger off of the tokens coming off of your commander. This deck wants to attack, so we might as well draw cards while we do it. Toski Bear of Secrets and Orin Frostfang. They're going to give you a lot of cards and staying power as you turn your creatures sideways. Now, card advantage is one way to stay ahead in the game and not lose tempo as you commit so much to the battlefield. That's the problem with a lot of creature-based strategies, that you empty your hand, you put everything on the battlefield, and then a single board wipe takes you out and you're empty-handed. Hopefully, you've been drawing cards this whole time, so you still have a reserve of creatures, a reserve of things to do, so you don't get blown out. The other way to protect is to have that protection from board wipes. Selfless Spirit, Guardian of Faith, Luminous Broodmoth, all of these are creatures that protect your board. And sometimes, with the flash of Guardian of Faith, you have the ability to protect your board when your opponent can't see it. And so they've depended on the board wipe, and when they can't get your creatures out of the battlefield, that's just a game-winning play. This is why we've also supplemented it with some spells that do something similar. Things like Heroic Intervention, Flawless Maneuver, Teferi's Protection, all of these can protect your board and give you a huge tempo swing as your opponents essentially one-sided board wipe themselves. There are a few others too that can pivot into aggression. I like Unbreakable Formation. It deals with +1/+1 counters. It can make your team bigger and more relevant. And then Akroma's Will. This can be protection, but it can also pivot to be just an insane game finisher. That play pattern of a one-sided board wipe is game winning, so we're going to lean into it by playing cards like By Invitation Only and Winds of Abandon. Winds of Abandon overloaded, yeah, that's easy. Just take out all your opponent's stuff, swing, kill them. By Invitation Only is a little bit more complicated, but it's got a lot of play to it. You're going to be going wide by creating 1/1s here and there all over the place, which means you're going to have a lot of sacrifice fodder for By Invitation Only. So your opponents are sacrificing relevant creatures, you're sacrificing 1/1s, and leaving your board relatively intact to attack. It's going to be real good. And finally, we want to finish out the game, make your 1/1s relevant, make your board bigger so that you can overtake your opponents. And so I like cards that can be late game mana sinks, but still be useful in the early game. Catilda, Dawnheart Prime, is a mana dork and can be a mana dork for a lot of your board too, letting you just ramp ahead of everyone else, but also it's got an activated ability that can grow your team and make things super relevant. Shalai, Voice of Plenty, is a favorite of mine. I mentioned that I have a commander deck with her at the helm. And so the idea of giving yourself protection so your opponents can't take out your relevant creatures, but then that late game, put a +1/+1 counter on things, put a +1/+1 counter on things, is going to be overwhelming and take over the game. And then finally, Gavany Township is easy. It's just an untapped land. It's a great inclusion, but then in the late game can take over, making your little creatures more relevant. Of course, these are slow and mana intensive. They're playable because they have a very low floor. There are some over-the-top spells that can just turn games into victories. Triumph of the Hordes. Yeah, just make everything have infect. You're going to overwhelm your opponents and win the game. Cathar's Crusade. With this many creatures, you're going to grow your army wide and tall and just take over. And then Craterhoof Behemoth's a classic. Throw it down, pump up your entire team, win in a single swing. Now, what I love about this deck is that it is infinitely customizable and you can tune it to your own playgroup. It's aggressive, it attacks, it's fun, and there's a lot of different ways to build it. If you like that humans build, go ahead and check it out. Thali's Lieutenant is amazing. Synergizes with humans, +1/+1 counters, it's great. If you want this to be a little bit more powerful, I'd add some combo potential in it and some more disruption. Heliod can combine with Walking Ballista, and there's tons of different ways to tutor them both out onto the battlefield. Notice both of these synergize with +1/+1 counters, and so if you want to go that direction, like Hamza, Guardian of the Arashin, is going to be really solid in this deck, and you can lean into +1/+1 counters. So there's a lot of ways that you can take this base deck and make it your own. That is the deck. It is aggressive. It's resilient. It has a ton more card draw than you would imagine, but most importantly, it's disruptive and it attacks in fun, different ways. I think you're gonna like this deck. If you want to pick up some of these cards or just some Christmas presents, go ahead and head over to Cool Stuff Inc. They're the sponsor of the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. And if you use the coupon code JUMBO5, you'll save 5% off your order. I also want to thank my patrons. They are amazing. They support me every day. Thank you, patrons. And thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more Commander content. Bye-bye, everyone.